New Year's Eve parties were given the green light in England yesterday after the government confirmed there'll be no new COVID restrictions before 2022. Oncologist Professor Angus Dalgleish says the new variant is much less severe than previous strains.
The reason it's so much more infectious is it passes to the nose, but it is 10 times less likely to go down to the chest. And it is that what causes the need to go to hospital if you get very short of breath, etc. You can basically get rid of it with a variety of mouthwashes, betadine, etc., soluble aspirin, pumping up vitamin D.
Meanwhile, business leaders in England want more support for the hospitality sector after the Omicron variant led to a sharp drop-off in trade in the run-up to Christmas. British Chambers of Commerce President Baroness McGregor-Smith wants business rates relief and the emergency rate of VAT extended beyond the end of March. She's also calling for a focused furlough support scheme. Nightclub owner Alex Proud told GB News he welcomes the decision.
Us, the most important thing is to confirm that we're staying open and there isn't going to be a lockdown in January. New Year's Eve, don't forget, we need people to book because obviously people didn't book in December with all the concerns. So we're still nervous, but we're very, very relieved right now.
The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has ordered a review of the current rules surrounding crossbow ownership. A 19-year-old man was arrested at Windsor Castle on Christmas Day while allegedly in possession of the weapon. He's since been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. It's currently an offence for anyone under the age of 18 to purchase or possess a crossbow. In the United States, the judge in the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell is urging the jury to work longer hours as COVID-19 cases rise in New York. She says an astronomical spike caused by the Omicron variant means there's an increasing risk that jurors and trial participants may need to quarantine. The British socialite is on trial in the States, accused of luring young girls to be abused by Jeffrey Epstein. She denies all the charges. Two staff from the charity Save the Children are among at least 35 people who've been killed in Myanmar on Christmas Eve. Government soldiers rounded up a group of people in a village before fatally shooting them. The charity says two workers were travelling back to a nearby office when they got caught up in the attack. They've called on the UN Security Council to respond. Here, new research has found teenagers whose parents smoke are more likely to take up the habit. The Better Health Smoke-Free campaign found that teenagers are 4 times more likely to start lighting up themselves if they're raised by a smoker. Clinical psychologist from the University College London, Dr. Bettina Honan, says that a learned behaviour such as smoking is hard to give up.
Most people who are smokers now are likely to have started smoking when they are children, and it's a habit, and habits are really hard to break.
And it was inevitable, but now it's official. England has lost the Ashes. They were completely thrashed in the third test in Melbourne, Australia, with the Australians beating the tourists by an innings and 14 runs to take an unassailable 3-0 lead. It took only 12 days of cricket for the hosts to retain the Ashes, and they'll now be looking for the 5-0 victory, total whitewash. The fourth test begins in Sydney on January the 4th. That's your news update. I'm back in an hour. See you then.
Polly, thanks very much indeed. So the government confirmed last night that there will be no further COVID restrictions in England before 2022, given mass events the go-ahead and leaving nightclubs open for New Year's Eve, in contrast with the other UK nations. But what do Labour make of the decision? We spoke with Siobhan McDonough, Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden, earlier.
This is saying is that, we're as delighted as anybody that people's plans, their new year is not going to be ruined by further restrictions. It's just that with this, you always have to have an eye on the data. You always have to look for the future. And over the last couple of years, we've seen decisions that are made too late and result in worse outcomes. So we're just being cautious because as yet, we've not had that same data shared with us as the government will have had the opportunity to see. You know, there are some figures that we know. What we're particularly looking at is if the number of admissions to hospitals in London in particular reached 400, then something would have to happen. Now, clearly, that hasn't hit that number. So it looks like the system with cope. Because with all of this, you're always looking to what will happen in the next week, the next 10 days, what will happen to admissions in hospital. Because, you know, certainly in London, we are in a difficult place because 1 in 20 of us have got the virus, and that has a huge impact on the staff in our hospitals and our care sector. And also, I am sure that we all desperately want the schools to open next week. So it's really important that there's a plan to do that.
The thoughts and concerns there of Labour MP Siobhan McDonough and the decision. But what about the public? Our Yorkshire and Humberside reporter Anna Riley spoke to people in Hull to get their views.
Let people enjoy it this year and then bring it in. But to bring it's going to affect a lot of businesses, obviously. A lot of people have already gone out of business where we used to go. So now we're having to shop elsewhere. So unfortunately that's going to affect people anyway, as we've seen over the last year. So yeah, I think it would be a good idea to bring it in because it's getting a little bit out of hand now again.
Just get on with it and carry on how we are. Yeah, carry on how we are and just live with it. Like, it's not fair, is it? Like, we're going to be stuck with it for a long time and we haven't got a cure for it, so yeah.
I just think he needs to decide what he's going to do and stop leaving us in the lurch right now. No one knows what we're doing, do we? And that's it.
I think the COVID situation and all what's been done for us has been absolutely fabulous with our injections, our booster. But I still do believe that we still should be very, very careful. You know, I still think that people should still take care because we don't really know when this is going to finish. Or, you know, we've got to still look after each other and everybody else around us and just make sure that, fingers crossed, that it will get better. But for now, I'm still keeping my mask on because it's hiding my wrinkles as well.
I think it's disgusting. I think you should get another lockdown now. Definitely. Because it's not get changing.
They're not too bad. I think he's doing all right at the minute.
Still with the pandemic, and in the United States, health officials have halved the recommended isolation time for people with asymptomatic COVID-19 from 10 to 5 days. Dr. Lawrence Gerlis, who's the CEO of Same Day Doctor, would like to see the UK follow suit.
They were right to reduce the isolation period from 10 days to 7 days. I'd like to go a bit further and do what the Americans have done and reduce it to 5 days with negative lateral flow, because that's the real problem in the NHS is staff shortages. But let me remind you, there are always staff shortages at this time of year. Doctors and nurses plan their holidays to take time off at Christmas, and they deserve it. It's run by a skeleton staff anyway every year. And if you look back at newspaper headlines for the last 15 or 20 years, there's always a midwinter crisis. There are always respiratory viruses in the UK. We have that sort of climate that encourages that. So I don't believe this is any different from where we would be if we had a mild flu epidemic.
A medical point of view, but travel experts are warning of severe disruption over the new year. Airline passengers have been hit by the grounding of thousands of flights due to staff shortages caused by COVID. Around 8,000 flights were cancelled globally between Christmas Eve and Boxing Day. Our London reporter Alice Porter has more.
If we look in the UK at the moment, we've had the travel sector was actually starting to pick up towards the end of this year, and then Omicron hit, and then the government brought in some more regulations and restrictions in terms of testing, understandably to stop the spread of Omicron. But the unfortunate reality is that has a negative impact in terms of passengers. It's seen as less attractive to fly and go away, and that has a knock-on effect for airlines. And of course, the sector has been so badly damaged, and there's a real real concern that if these restrictions that are in place currently, if they continue, then it could make the sector have more of a downturn, which is really, really worrying. But then let's just say you are able to book a flight and you're happy to take the risk and do your testing. Question is, well, where do you go at the moment? So, of course, France, Germany, they've pretty clear that they're not having travellers from the UK. Austria say you have to have had your booster. So that takes up the whole of that kind of that winter market of people who might go skiing. And then, of course, if you see all the travel disruption that's happening at the moment, for those people who might think of a quick sort of winter getaway for a few days, you find that quite off-putting. And the concern is that over the next month or two, is that other countries that are kind of catching up with Omicron may impose more restrictions. That's what Paul Charles, the travel expert, was saying to me when I spoke to him earlier.
I think there's a danger that other governments around the world put in place tougher measures because they're at an earlier stage in the cycle of Omicron than the UK is. The UK seems at the moment to be getting through this by putting in place perhaps cautious guidance and advice rather than tougher restrictions in the UK itself. And that means that the spike is happening faster than might be in other countries. So the concern is that other countries put in place measures to stop UK citizens travelling. And that would be my concern, that January itself sees a wide range of restrictions in place, which put off people from travelling further. There's no doubt 2022 is going to be a strong year in terms of bookings and confidence once we get through this wave of Omicron. The problem is it's getting through the next month or so, and no cash coming in for much of the travel sector. That's going to hurt those smaller businesses that will find it difficult to survive.
Away from COVID now, and children whose parents smoke are 4 times as likely to take up smoking themselves. That is the result of research from the Better Health Smoke Free campaign, who are highlighting the impact that adult smokers have on the young people in their lives. Dr. Bettina Hochnen, who is a clinical psychologist at the University College London, told GB News it's difficult for people to give up if they take up the habit in their teenage years.
We know that the primary motivators for people to want to give up smoking are to do with health, to do with money, but also to do with family. And so this research is really important. It's based on a social learning theory, which is one of the oldest theories in psychology, which says that children learn by observing and by imitating the most relevant models in their lives, and parents are those models. So in all aspects of their lives, parents are socializing children, and smoking is one of those behaviors. It's a learned behavior. Thinking about the pandemic, I think there is some evidence of increase over the pandemic, but I think this research is actually much more important in thinking about the impact that parents have on their children's later behavior. But we know that there's a kind of dose effect. So the more adults you have in your life who are modeling this behavior increases the chances of you taking up smoking yourself. It's not a direct relationship, that's for sure, but it's 4 times more likely is actually, fairly significant. The other thing is we know that 80% of adult smokers took up smoking themselves before the age of 20. So actually, most people who are smokers now are likely to have started smoking when they are children. And it's a habit. Our brain actually loves habits and behavior. It's a very efficient way for our brain to work. And habits are really hard to break. So if children have started smoking, then and are more likely to go on to become smokers themselves in adulthood, they have this really big mountain to climb to try to give up as an adult, which we know is a really hard thing to do, but really worthwhile.
And that is it for now, but I'll be back at 6 o'clock when I'll be joined by Robert Halfon, the Conservative MP for Harlow and chair of the Education Select Committee on getting our children safely back to school in just a few days. Coming up in a few minutes, Alex Phillips looks back at some of the big issues from 2021. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Well, it's generally cloudy with clear skies across Scotland, rain arriving in the southwest. Let's take a look at more of those details. A band of cloud and rain will affect the southwest tonight, bringing outbreaks of heavy rain and strong winds with local gales for coasts. Temperatures will rise through the night. Any drizzle will clear the southeast